Thank you very much, Mr. Stark. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Commerce and Labor. I am your vice chair, acting as chair today, as Ms. Howdigy is not available for the meeting today, so I will be chairing. So welcome to everyone. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And if we could have the roll call, please.
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Flores.
Present.
Assemblyman Frierson. Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Chair Howdigy.
Thank you very much. Please mark Chair Howdigy absent, excused, and other members present as they arrive. Good afternoon. This afternoon, folks, we'll be starting with Assembly Bill 442. Has been requested by Assemblyman Orlicker, who would like to just give us a brief overview, and then he has another commitment in another committee. So we'll be happy to excuse him afterwards. So with that, I will open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 442 and invite the Assemblyman forward to testify. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Carlton and members of the committee. For the record, I am David Ornitlicker, representing Assembly District 20 in Clark County. I'm here today to present Assembly Bill 442, and the bill will require healthcare providers who are authorized to prescribe controlled substances to complete training to better identify patients who have or are at risk of developing a substance use disorder. The bill is sponsored by the Interim Legislative Committee on Healthcare, and while I was not a member of the committee, its chair, Assemblywoman Leslie Cohen, invited me to carry the bill through session. I am pleased to be here to present it before you. And before we get into the presentation, I would like to direct your attention to the conceptual amendment that should be available on Nellis, which we will discuss more in a few minutes. But the basic point is to implement this as a requirement of continuing education rather than as a requirement of licensure. The problem that the bill addresses is the nationwide opioid epidemic. It was a serious problem before COVID-19 hit us, and emerging data shows that it has worsened over the past year. This represents a crisis on top of a crisis, and within these crises is another extremely concerning issue, drug use during pregnancy, which impacts mother, baby, and the larger community. The Interim Health Committee considered these issues in depth, and at the recommendation of my co-presenters, decided to move forward with this piece of legislation. At this point, I would like to turn over my time to Dr. Andrea Peterson, Clinical Pharmacy Specialist in Pediatrics Neonatology, an Assistant Professor of Pharmacy Practice, College of Pharmacy at Roseman University of Health Sciences, and our own Dr. Stephanie Woodard at HHS to provide additional background on the issue and discuss the bill. And I appreciate your allowing me to head over to HHS and present my bill there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee members, are there any questions for the Assemblyman at this time? Seeing no one wishing to be recognized, thank you. Thank you, Assemblyman. Please go do your job in HHS. Thank you very much. Get over to Dr. Peterson. So Dr. Peterson, if you'd like to proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Carlson. This is Stephanie Woodard from the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. Dr. Peterson is having difficulty getting into the meeting. She just let me know that she's on hold and waiting to be admitted.
Okay, broadcast services, could we address that, please?
Vice Chair, we will let her in when we see her. We don't currently see her in the waiting room.
Okay.
Madam Chair, sorry for my tardiness. This is Assemblyman Frierson. I'm here.
Thank you, Speaker. We mark folks present as they arrive, so thank you very much. I appreciate that. Does Ms. Woodard Ms. Woodard, does the doctor have the correct Zoom link?
I believe so. I'm confirming that with her right now.
Thank you very much. We'll give her a moment. Gotta love technology.
Chair Stephanie Woodard again, if I may.
Yes, please.
She is listed under Steve Neighbor in the waiting room on the Zoom meeting.
This is
Broadcast.
this is Andrea Peterson. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Dr. Peterson. Welcome to the committee. Sorry for your technical difficulties.
No, I apologize. I'm out of town, so I'm at my parents' house. Sorry.
Well, that's fine. Congratulations. So if you'd like to go, and thank you for taking time away from your family to be with us today. If you'd like to go ahead and proceed.
Thank you for having me. You're ready for me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Hargi and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Andrea Peterson, and I am a clinical pharmacist for Dignity Health's St. Rome Dominican Hospital and am co-founder of the Empowered program. Empowered stands for Empowering Mothers for Positive Outcomes with Education, Recovery, and Early Development. This program originated in 2017 after we discovered an increased number of infants suffering from neonatal abstinence syndrome, also known as withdrawal, and a need for improved care coordination for pregnant women experiencing substance use disorder within our community. We support these women by aligning them with services throughout their pregnancy and continue to support them and their infant for 1 year postpartum. It's truly been a privilege to see the extraordinary strength of these women as they change the trajectory of their lives for their children. In November of 2019, we had the opportunity to present Empowered to the Interim Health Committee, and we're originally going to seek funding to continue this work, and then the pandemic hit. We understood the financial impact this would have on the state, and instead came up with a no-cost policy option that has the potential to impact many, not just pregnant women. This policy option revolves around continuing education credits for SBIRT, which stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. And was adopted by the Interim Health Committee. Many thanks to members of that committee and Dr. Stephanie Woodard from DHHS for their help in drafting this legislation. As I mentioned, SBIRT stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. It is an evidence-based approach that can be rapidly performed in a number of settings to identify patients with substance use disorder or patients who are at risk for substance use disorder and is a Medicaid reimbursable service. It has been found that utilization of this method by healthcare professionals can aid them in identifying and successfully assisting individuals not actively seeking an intervention or treatment for their problem, and will set both providers and patients up for success in addressing the opioid epidemic in our state. This practice is recommended by all major societies, including SAMHSA, which stands for Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the United States Preventative Service Task Force as a best practice and as a standard of care. AB 442 will require the providers who can prescribe controlled substances complete a 2-hour training on SBIRT once, and will qualify for existing continuing education requirements related to substance use and other addictive disorders and the prescribing of opioids set forth in AB 474. Those who are newly licensed in the state of Nevada would have to complete the SBIRT training within the first 2 years of their licensing, and those who are already licensed in Nevada would need to complete the training prior to January 1st, 2024. Thank you very much, and both Dr. Stephanie Woodard and I are available for questions.
And thank you very much. We appreciate that. Dr. Woodard, did you have anything to add Ms. Woodard, did you have anything that you would like to add before we go to questions?
I do not. I'm here to address questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe I have Dr. Kamyar. Are you here to speak now? Did you have a statement or are you just here in support? Okay, not hearing anything, we'll go ahead and move on. So committee members, questions? Assemblywoman Tolles?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this legislation forward. I'm absolutely supportive of what it's, how it's going to help people, honestly, at the end of the day. But I was just curious if you could give a little bit more background on what the current continuing education requirements are for our licensees. Do they typically get their continuing ed every year, or is it every 2 years? I'm just trying to figure out when their opportunity will be to comply with this by January 2024. And then also wondering, is this going to add the whole to their entirety of continuing ed, or is this within the existing requirements for continuing ed?
Dr. Woodard, do you want to speak to that or do you want me to a little bit?
So Stephanie Woodard, for the record, I can take the latter question. And the goal of this legislation was not to add any additional CME requirements, but to allow the expert training to take the place of current requirements, which were put into statute in the 2017 legislative session in Assembly Bill 474, which requires 2 CMEs for the screening or misuse of substances. So if necessary, these CMEs would actually meet those minimum requirements.
Okay. Thank you. And then that other first question was just sort of a background, just for our knowledge. How often do they have to complete CME requirements? Is it on an annual basis, biannual basis?
This is Andrea Peterson for the record, and my understanding is every 2 years.
Perfect, thank you. So plenty of time to get it done before January of 2024. Great, thank you. I appreciate the questions, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Committee members, other questions? Assemblywoman Kasama?
Thank you, Vice Chair. So it's kind of along the lines of Assemblywoman Tolles, but in the exhibits, there's an exhibit here from the Osteopathic Medical Association, and it says that currently they were required to complete at least 2 hours of training relating specifically to persons with substance abuse and other addictive disorders and the prescribing of opioids. And so this definition is slightly different. So they would have to take 2 hours of that requirement plus 2 hours for this new language. But in total, they don't have to take more than what is currently required for a total amount of CE. Is that correct? So basically, they're going to have 4 hours of opioid type training. Is that correct? I just wanted to clarify.
So Stephanie Woodard, for the record, to address the question, the intent of this legislation is to allow the 2 hours of CMEs required for ESPERT to count as the 2 hours that are already required for the screening and understanding of addiction and substance misuse that is required already in statute.
So just 2 hours then regarding this.
Correct. That was the intention of the legislation. I understand there is an amendment that's also available as an exhibit.
Correct. So if we already have that in regulation, then why are we adding this if this would also include the 2 hours that are already listed there?
Andrea Peterson for the record. I'm not sure if Dr. Woodard was trying to speak, but this would be to, mandate that SBIRT training, just so that everybody can be practicing that evidence-based approach for that screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment within the state, all of our providers.
So it's more an emphasis it's more regulation to emphasize that this is a requirement now in statute.
Assemblywoman, if you would ask for a follow-up, that's protocol.
Sorry.
We would
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Right.
Speaking on the behalf of the opposition is, I understand the concern, but they will have an opportunity to air their opposition. So if you have another question, please proceed.
No, my apologies. Just trying to understand.
Thank you. So with that, are there any other questions at this time from committee members? I don't see any other questions. So with that, I believe we can go to support of the measure. So do we have anyone on Zoom, the Zoom meeting in support? We could go ahead and recognize them. Not seeing anyone. Broadcast services, if we could go to the phone for anyone that is in support of the bill.
To testify in support on AB 442, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 655, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, this is Joseph Heck, Red Rock Government Relations on behalf of the Nevada Osteopathic Medical Association. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. I know that our exhibit is in opposition, but upon seeing the proposed amendment, it addresses all of the concerns that we had in our letter of opposition, namely making this a one-time requirement rather than a recurrent requirement, allowing it to apply to the current CME requirements, and allowing a grace period for new licensee applicants to take the course. Therefore, we are no longer in opposition and would be in support. Thank you.
Thank you, former Senator Heck. Nice to hear from you. Hope you're well.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Other callers in support, please.
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcast Services. Can we go to those that might be in opposition, please?
Yes, Chair, to testify in opposition on AB 442, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. Could we go to those in neutral?
To testify in neutral on AB 442, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'll go back to Dr. Peterson. Do you have any closing comments that you would like to make before we close the hearing?
I do not. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Dr. Peterson, and thank you for taking time away from your family on this holiday weekend.
Apologize for the technical difficulties.
I have a hard time getting into my own meetings sometimes, and I have people here to help me. So no problem. Thank you very much for being here. So with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 442. And we will, let me see what's on my list. We will go to Assembly Bill 359. We'll open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 359. We have Assemblywoman Considine available as a committee member. So with that, Assemblywoman, if you would like to go ahead and begin.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. I am Venetia Considine. I represent Assembly District 18, which is in Southeast Las Vegas and a little bit of Henderson. And I am here today to talk about Assembly Bill 359. Just a little bit of background. Almost 850,000 Nevadans that are ages 5 and over speak a language other than English in their home. That is more than 1 in 4 residents. Nearly 70% of that group tend to speak Spanish. Between 1980 and 2018, there has been an increase of over 1,000%. Nevada being the largest, let me rephrase that. Nevada has experienced the largest percentage increase in those speaking a language other than English at home by an increase of 1,000% between those dates, 1980 and 2018. So those individuals represent approximately 31% of the population in the state. And many of them live at or below the federal poverty limit. Beyond that, these populations are also vibrant markets for goods and services. And when a business reaches out to a community that speaks a language other than English with the intention of creating a business relationship, that's where Assembly Bill 359 comes in. To use a sports metaphor, the creation of AB 359 is with the intention to sort of follow through, like you would if you were playing golf or any other sport. To complete the whole thing, you want to always follow through. So what AB 359 does is when a business entity that has reached out to a community that primarily speaks a language other than English and advertises, which is an amendment that I'll get to in just a moment, advertises to that community, whether it be on billboards, on the internet, through newspapers, through the TV. If they are reaching out to that community using the language of that community and inviting them in to create a business relationship to purchase a goods or a service, what this bill requires in that situation is that the contract, when those are required, that the contract is in the language of that community. So to me, that's the follow through from the beginning of creating that market relationship all the way through to making sure that the buyers of those goods and services have the contract in that language. Because if there are any disagreements between the business and the consumer, and for some reason they go to any court, the only thing that the court will focus on, or the main thing that the court will focus on, are the words in the contract. So if you negotiate or create a transaction from an entity where everything is done in a language other than English, but you cannot read the contract, and something goes wrong, and you find out when you're in court that the contract did not match what was told to you, you're in an incredible bind. And that's the problem that AB 359 is designed to take care of. So there is an amendment. It is available on Nellis, and I would like to go through the bill right now with the amendment and then open it up to any questions that you have. I would like to start, I want to go a little bit out of order with this. So I'd like to start with section 4, which is on the bottom of page 3, because this is really the intent of the bill. The amendment adds on section 4, subsection 1. It says a person who in the course of his or her business or occupation, and the amendment adds, advertises in a language other than English and negotiates orally or in writing any of the transactions listed in subsection 3 in a language other than English, or who allows an employee or agent of the person to negotiate orally or in writing any of the transactions listed in subsection 3 in the language other than English, shall deliver a translation of the contract or agreement that results from such negotiations in the language that was used in the negotiation of the contract or agreement to the person who is a party to the contract or agreement and to the other person who may sign the contract or agreement. Basically, this boils down to it would be considered a deceptive trade practice if you advertise in a language other than English and you create a business relationship by selling the goods or services that require a contract, and that transaction was verbally in that language other than English, but you give them a contract that is only in English that cannot be understood. That is a deceptive trade practice. That's the genesis, or the meat of this whole bill. So to go back to the beginning to read the, go over the bill with the amendments. In section 3, subsection 1, I've made a small amendment. Currently it says, as used in sections 3 to 9 inclusive of this act, unless the context otherwise requires, contract or agreement means the document that creates the rights and obligations of the parties, which results from, and I have added in the amendment, a transaction or negotiation discussed in section 4 of this act. The reason for adding a transaction is not every purchase for the sale of goods and services is always a negotiation. In fact, consumer-wise, most contracts are sort of just a take it or leave it contract. It's more of a transaction, it is not a negotiation. So just to confirm that this covers both, I wanted to add transactions. So that is why that is added. Section 2, subsection 3 has a list of the terms that are not included. So these are items that are exempt from this contract requirement. However, I have deleted, or the amendment includes a deletion of subsection 3A3, a retail installment contract or account or other revolving sales or loan. The reason is somewhat twofold. From a consumer protection point of view, retail installment contracts, there are a lot of great actors for the sale and purchase of cars, but there are also some in the subprime market that aren't good actors. So this actually will be a backup. Currently in Chapter 97, if someone is speaking Spanish and they request that contract in Spanish, that's already in the retail installment contracts under Chapter 97. So removing this section from being exempted from AB 59, it will just be a backup. So because, again, they would have to advertise, have sort of a budget, be availing themselves of going into these communities that are speaking a language other than English for this to even kick in. But we want to make sure that if that is the case and they are speaking, let's say Tagalog, they go to a buy here, pay here, or a subprime car dealership, and the entire conversation is done in Tagalog. But it comes down to one person's understanding is that they're purchasing a car and the contract says lease. That's incredibly important for that contract to be in Tagalog in that situation. So that is the reason that I'm asking for that portion to be amended. Section 4, I've already pointed that out because that is kind of the big part of the purpose of this bill. Also want you to point out in section 4, subsection 3B, I have an amendment on that. I was contacted concerning a worry that this may or may not encompass casino markers. So I put in an amendment to exempt them. It is not necessarily a well-written amendment in that case, so I will likely be changing it to be a little bit more specific to the specific NRS section. But just wanted to make sure that we are not encompassing areas that I don't want to harm. The reason why this bill is narrowly tailored to those that advertise is so that it does not harm businesses, small businesses, especially local businesses that are coming out of a pandemic. This is specifically geared to, like what I've said, those businesses that are availing themselves financially through advertisements one way or another to create a relationship, stating, that they're speaking that language other than English. And I don't want to accidentally include other entities that would complicate that situation. Because this bill is more narrow than it is originally written, I am also asking to delete section 6 and section 7. Section 6 deals with conspicuously displaying a notice in the place of business that that translations are required. where that shouldn't really be required if they're not advertising and availing themselves. So that's the reason for removing Section 6. Section 7, it's along the same lines. Section 7 deals with interpreters, which there's a lot of issues just overall, especially with consumer protections with children or people who don't understand the concepts of some of this, not being able to fully translate it. So the idea, again, going back to if they're advertising in that language, if they're saying that they are fluent and there's someone in that business speaking that language, they should be the ones, as it would be in any other business relationship, explaining that contract. So that is the reason for my request to delete Section 7. Also, just want to point out in Section 8, there are certain things that are exceptions to requiring to be translated within a contract. And those are names of persons, numbers, brand names, trade names, etc. So there are some things within those contracts that will not need to be translated into another, into the language that's spoken other than English. And also Section 9 allows the person to rescind the contract or agreement if it becomes a law, is breached. Everything else in the following pages of this bill are all conforming language to bring it in line in the different areas. So I know that was a lot of information. Just want to go back to the fact that this was narrowly tailored so that if a business is already doing this and is creating those relationships, that they just follow through from beginning to end, and that anyone who builds that relationship can also walk out and the next day or the next week, read the contract to make sure that they fully understand it. So thank you for your time, and I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman, for walking us through. We understand showing up, having a bill and having to go through the amendment at the same time as you go through the bill. I think we've all, anyone who's done a bill presentation has had to go through that. So with all the conversation, I think I would like to clarify that the first domino that has to fall is that the business chooses to advertise in that language. If they choose not to advertise in that language, nothing in this bill would apply to them. Is that correct?
Exactly, Madam Chair. Venetia Considine for the record. Yes, because if this was so broad, then businesses would have to have languages or contracts in so many multiple languages, and that would cause a little bit more chaos. So exactly what you said. If they are availing themselves and they're reaching out to that community, that's when this triggers it.
Okay. And just for clarification purposes, this would not apply to nonprofits who provide safety net type services, food pantry, things that folks would need, because we do sometimes, nonprofits will let folks know that there are services available in their particular language, but they don't have the backup documents in a translated form for them. So this is strictly to businesses.
The intention for this was to businesses where there is the sale of goods and services. So that would not include any nonprofits. If that needs to be illustrated or elucidated more in the bill, I'm happy to do that.
I think you've clarified the record just by saying the sale portion of it. So that would alleviate some of the email concerns that I got. So thank you very much for addressing those concerns. I do have a number of members who do have questions. So I will go to Mr. O'Neill, Assemblyman O'Neill first. I believe I saw your hand.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for the time. Ms. Considine, very nice bill, a wonderful presentation. I have one quick question. I think I know the answer, but I just want to clarify. If a company advertises whatever the company business may be in English, but then at the bottom, you'll often see them say, si habla español, or whatever, they would be exempt still from this bill?
Thank you for the question, Assemblyman O'Neill through Vice Chair Carlton. This is Venetia Considine for the record. Thank you for the question. The intent of this bill would not be at the bottom of something, there's a line that says, yo habla español. The intent would be that the entire ad would be in that English, language other than English, because that means that not only that we are fluent in this language, we are, we are holding ourselves out as an entity that can have the entire conversation, negotiation, transaction with you.
I really appreciate that answer. That was more than what I thought, but you hit the nail on the head. Thank you very much, and thank you for the time, Vice Chair.
You're welcome, Assemblyman O'Neill. Thank you for the question. Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you first of all, for the really good explanation of the bill. I appreciate you going through it like that, section by section. So I just want to give an example so that I understand. So in advertising, like you mentioned, a billboard, or say they do an internet, something on their website, or they send a postcard in the mail or something like that. Whatever language they send that in, then they should have an appropriate contract if someone were to come in later to get that particular good or service. Do I understand that correctly?
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hardy. Through Vice Chair Carlton, this is Venetia Considine for the record. Yes, so one example that I've had in a conversation is if there is, let's say, a billboard that is in Mandarin, and somebody comes in and they speak Korean, and there just happens to be somebody speaking Korean, there is no onus on the business to then suddenly have a contract in Korean. I hope that kind of makes that clear.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to figure out, I understand if you're advertising in a certain language, but then, yeah, you wouldn't expect a business to have multiple contracts in all of these different languages. I mean, I assume they could get one, like in the example you described, but they're not going to have, 80 different contracts expected to have that many contracts in different languages.
Correct, Assemblywoman, through Vice Chair Carlton, Venetia Considine for the record. Yes, now there may be some businesses that are available to do like multiple, and they do ads in multiple different languages. They would be required under this bill to have those available if they did that. However, in the situation I said earlier, it would not be considered a deceptive trade practice if someone came into a business and was able to have a conversation in Russian with someone, and then demand to have that contract in Russian if there was no advertising or no availing of that business into that community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Hardy. And Assemblywoman Considine, you can go directly to the members. There's no need to go through the Vice Chair today. So Assemblywoman Tolles, your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thanks for this presentation. And I just have two quick questions to clarify. One is, when we talk about advertising, is that specifically paid advertising as opposed to social media, or would social media count in that? So, because oftentimes people might post things, Facebook or Twitter or something like that. So just wanted to clarify if that was captured in this or if that's excluded from this.
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Tolles. Venetia Considine for the record. If they are advertising on social media as a business, they do tend to have to pay for those ads. So if there are ads that are in a language other than English, I would agree. I would believe that they were paying for those. Now, if someone, let's say I really love business A and I just put up on social media in a language other than English how much I love them and I suggest people to go, that is not what I would consider advertising, or the definition of advertising, I believe, under NRS 598.
Perfect. Thanks for just making sure that was clear. And then the last thing is, I see that there's no effective date specifically outlined. And so I just wondered what the effective date would be. I believe there is a default, so maybe legal could help us with this. But just to make sure that there's enough time for businesses to be aware of this, so that they can implement these new practices. And so Do you know what the effective date is? Or would you consider putting a specific effective date to give them time?
Thank you for the question, Assemblywoman Tolles. This is Venetia Considine for the record. It is my understanding that without a date on the bill, that the effective date would be October 1st, 2021. If legal is here and I am wrong, please correct me.
I believe you are correct, Assemblywoman.
Thank you.
And I think the follow-up to Assemblywoman Tolles' question would be, do you think that would give folks enough time, depending upon when this bill would pass? Do you think October 1st is a good date, or will there still be continuing discussions about possibly giving businesses a little bit more time to comply? Has there been a conversation about that?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for the question. Venetia Considine for the record. I have not had any of the discussions that I've had. I've not heard any questions about the date of effectiveness. Part of that might be that there's an assumption that if you are advertising already in a language other than English, that this, some may already be doing this, or that it would not be that much of a heavy lift to do. But yet, if there is anyone out there that wants to move this date, I am certainly happy to have a conversation with them and be open to doing that.
And thank you very much, Ms. Assemblywoman. We appreciate the answer. So with that, I am not seeing any other members of the committee wishing to be recognized at this time. So going through just to double check. I don't believe so. So with that, I believe we can go to those in support of the bill. I believe we have Ms. Romero, who was listed in support of the bill. Is she available?
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Sophia Romero. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. Yes, I'm here to comment today in support of AB 359. AB 359 goes a long way to solving a problem that we see regularly. I am an attorney at Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada and the Consumer Rights Project. And we have many people coming to us because they've signed a contract that was written in English, despite not being able to read it, because they relied on what they were told by the person on the other side of the table. People in this situation tend to go to places that advertise that they speak a particular language. And while this happens regularly with the Spanish-speaking community, it also is prevalent among the AAPI communities as well, Asian American and Pacific Islander communities. Often people in these situations tend to rely upon their children to translate, kids that are too young to enter into contracts themselves, or who are unlikely to have the vocabulary or understanding to accurately translate these transactions. People who do not speak English tend to trust others who speak the same language as them. They view them as their community members, and depending on the culture, sometimes even view them as family. They believe that what the person on the other side of the table is telling them is true. They believe that this person is truly trying to help them instead of trying to take their money. And unfortunately, as we see all too often, taking their money is the result of these transactions. This bill will have a great impact on breaking down the language barriers for non-English speaking communities and will help stop them from being targeted by predatory business practices. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment here today.
And thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate it. So with that, broadcast services, if we could go to anyone in support on the phone, please.
Yes, Chair. To testify in support on AB 359, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. Could we go to callers in opposition?
Testify in opposition on AB 359, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. If we could open up the line for the opportunity for those in neutral, please.
Yes, Chair, to testify in neutral on AB 359, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 124, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Carlton and members of the committee. Paul Moradkin, M-O-R-A-D-K-H-A-N with the Vegas Chamber. First, I'd like to thank the bill sponsor for reaching out to the business community regarding AB 359. I believe we had some very good productive conversations about finding the proper balance regarding the concerns that were brought forth and also creating a standard that would be important to the business community. And we appreciate her accepting our suggestion on an advertising standard. And so we are in neutral today, and we appreciate the work of the bill sponsor to reaching out to the business community to find a resolution. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Moradkin. Broadcast services, is there anyone else in neutral?
Yes, sure. Caller with the last 3 digits of 114, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Dundar-Loop and members of the committee. Amber Stidham, that's S-T-I-D-H-A-M, on behalf of the Henderson Chamber. We too want to thank Assemblywoman Considine for reaching out to our organization early in this process to talk through the concepts of the bill and walk through some of our concerns and questions. Really appreciate all of her hard work. Just want to look over the posted amendment so we can respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Broadcast services, anyone else in neutral, please?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 336, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. This is Phyllis Gergovich, Phyllis Gurgevich for the record. I'm calling on behalf of Nevada Bankers Association. And thank you, Madam Vice Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to comment in neutral. And thank you to the bill sponsor. We greatly appreciate having had the opportunity to meet and have conversations, share some of our concerns as well as suggestions for improvement. We're reviewing the amendment and think that it alleviates all our concerns and really look forward to continuing to work with the bill sponsor. So thank you again for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you for participating today. Next caller, please.
Chair, there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. So we'll go back to the bill sponsor. Assemblywoman Considine, do you have any closing comments?
Thank you, Vice Chair Carlton. I just want to thank the committee for allowing this bill to be heard, and I want to thank everyone that I've been working with for multiple months to make sure that we could get something that is reflective of the diversity of our state, that is also a protection for consumers, and also looks to the future. So I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend.
And thank you very much, Ms. Considine, and we look forward to you getting the amendment finalized and to everyone that it needs to be, because the clock is ticking between now and next Friday. So good luck with that. So with that, we will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 359, and we will open up the hearing on our final bill this afternoon, which is Assembly Bill 298. We have our committee member, Assemblyman Flores, here to present the bill. Mr. Flores, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and esteemed colleagues of the Commerce and Labor Committee. I am Assemblyman Edgar Flores, proudly representing Assembly District 28, and I'm here to present Assembly Bill 298. If I could just briefly, anecdotally share a story that triggered my desire and more than anything, lit the fire in my belly to say I needed to get involved. And then later learned from Legal Aid of Southern Nevada that they were working on this. So I'm very happy I was able to work with them. But anecdotally in the community, I had heard numerous stories namely from folk who struggle with the English language and or don't speak the English language, period, share stories that they thought they purchased a vehicle when in fact they were only leasing it. And I found that to be wildly unbelievable and more than anything predatory on behalf of some of these businesses. And I had that frustration and I had heard it multiple times. And then luckily I had an opportunity to link up with Legal Aid of Southern Nevada, who then took me to a myriad of other instances and other situations and more technical issues when it comes to leasing a vehicle. And so I am going to briefly provide some overarching information regarding purchasing of a vehicle and what goes into those contracts versus when you're leasing a vehicle. And then I'm going to hand over the presentation to Ms. Romero, who will then walk you through the technical aspects and give you a deeper dive and insight into exactly what's happening out there. But before I do that, I did want to say thank you to all the stakeholders who worked on this particular bill with us. We're very appreciative of their feedback, and I know some hours were put into it, so I just wanted to say thank you to them. So just for some background information, when you purchase a vehicle here in the state of Nevada, there are certain built-in terms in a prescribed sales contract that not only help consumers, but they also help level the playing field amongst dealerships. So for example, terms like making sure that one particular dealer can't repossess a vehicle before its competitor, or that a dealership isn't charging more in late fees than other dealerships. This ensures that every single dealership is working under the same umbrella of rules. And more importantly, it helps the consumer know exactly what to expect when they're entering into a standard sales contract. Unfortunately, the situation we have here in the state of Nevada is that the same is not true for leases. With the exception of some federal regulations, the leasing market here, the consumer leasing market in Nevada, is largely unregulated. And this results with unscrupulous businesses skirting the protections built into sales contracts. And what they do is instead push you into a lease agreement. For example, currently there is no regulation as to the definition of default, the amount of fees that can be charged, or even when, again, as I previously mentioned, when somebody thinks they're buying a car and months or years later find out that they're actually entering into a lease agreement. And so again, that goes to the heart of where I started. But after I spoke with Legal Aid, they went into a very long list of very technical issues that is happening in this largely unregulated lease world. And so what I'd like to talk about is, understandably, a lot of Nevadans can fall victim and unfortunately be in a situation like the one I've described. But this is really happening with our underrepresented communities, namely our non-English speaking community or our community who that's English is their second language. And unfortunately, may be able to entertain like a brief conversation, but really when it comes to reading a document, don't really understand exactly what they're getting into, which really falls in line with the conversation that we heard in the previous hearing with Assemblywoman Considine. So what I want to do with Assembly Bill 298, and I want to make sure that everybody understands, I'm working off of the conceptual amendment that's on Nellis. Please defer to that. Don't look at the original language. As you all know, we start with one piece of legislation, but after working with the stakeholders, we are working strictly off of the conceptual amendment. And what we're trying to do there is take a first step. I'm not saying that this is going to fix it all, but it's a first step to help us specifically with our used car leases and making sure that we put them on the same playing field as other vehicle transactions in the state, making sure that we have those protections and safeguards in place. At this time, if I can, Madam Chair, we have Ms. Sophia Romero, who's an attorney with the Consumer Rights Project at the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, who's going to give some remarks, walk us through the bill, and then really give us more of a personal perspective of what she sees out there every day in the market.
Thank you, Assemblyman Flores. Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to help present here today. For the record, and as Assemblyman Flores stated, my name is Sophia Romero, and I'm a staff attorney in the Consumer Rights Project at Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. Before I begin, I would just like to thank Assemblyman Flores as well as the stakeholders who helped us really hone this legislation into what is now the conceptual amendment. It will, hopefully, if this measure passes, it will be a much needed addition to Nevada law and solves a problem that we see on nearly a daily basis. As we know, second to buying a home, purchasing a vehicle is the most expensive purchase of one's life. While not everyone owns a home, most everyone, especially in Nevada, has to buy a car in order to get to work, the grocery store, the doctor, get their kids to school, just essentially get around and live life. Because the volume of vehicle sales and repairs in the state is so high, not a day goes by where someone doesn't reach out to Legal Aid Center seeking assistance on a car issue. Unfortunately, abuses surrounding car leases has become the most common issue we see. We see everything from people having their cars repossessed when they are less than 24 hours late with a payment, sometimes despite assurances that they wouldn't be repossessed until a later date, to being charged upwards of $25 a day in late fees, an amount that tends to increase. And even people who had no idea that they leased a vehicle instead of purchasing one, despite oral assurances and representations that it actually was a sale. To say this affects the non-English speaking community disproportionately is an understatement. I have sat in a deposition with a client, an older gentleman who was almost in tears because he kept having to respond to opposing counsel's question with, "I don't read or understand English," for each of the 72 times she pointed out the word lease in his contract. When after years of paying and being almost done with his lease agreement, his vehicle was repossessed despite the dealership's promise that they wouldn't repossess for another week to give him a chance to pay. When he came to our office, it was me who had the unfortunate task of telling him that it was not a purchase agreement, but rather a lease agreement, which, unlike the sales contract that we currently use here in Nevada, does not have a 30-day built-in grace period. A local pro bono attorney and I recently wrapped up a case where in July of 2019, a woman leased a 2003 Mercury with 130,000 miles on it. She was required to pay on that lease for a term of 115 months or 9.5 years, if you want to do the math. And at the end of the lease, she would still have to pay $3,359.52 in order to own that car. The reality of the matter is that that vehicle will not be running 9 years from now. And even if it is running, there's no way that it's going to have a value of $3,300. Like the example before, this woman had no idea that she had signed a lease agreement instead of a sales contract. However, unlike the example before, her primary language is English. She's a native English speaker and still had no idea that it was a lease agreement instead of a sales contract. Additionally, her vehicle was repossessed 2 days prior to the due date of her next payment, a date that the dealership had confirmed with her in a text message. This is so prevalent that we even had a former employee who had just come over to the office, just started doing intakes, and she said, "Wow, I see a lot of this one dealership." And I said, "Yeah, they do this all the time." And she said, "Well, I bought my car there." And I said, "Are you sure you really bought your car?" And the next day, sure enough, she came in to work with her lease agreement and was just completely helpless. She had no idea what to do. So this happens more than we would think. We want to think these are these are the rare instances, but these are not the rare instances. This is happening more often than not. While it used to be 1 or 2 used car dealerships that engage in these type of predatory practices, as regulation on car sales has increased, so have predatory leasing practices. It's because of these practices we need clear laws surrounding consumer vehicle leases. AB 298 seeks to make practices surrounding lease agreements more defined and helps both consumers and legitimate businesses alike. Now I will walk through the sections of the bill. So Section 2 puts in, again, as Assemblyman Flores stated, we are working off the conceptual amendment, not the original draft of the legislation. So Section 2 puts into statute the standard default language, which is already a part of every car sales contract in Nevada. So this is not different for dealerships. If you're selling a car, this is the same terms that you already have to comply with. This now just applies to leases. Section 3 focuses on used car leases and requires certain terms to the lease agreement, whether in the agreement itself or in an addendum. This lets the consumers know the terms of default, not to sign the document if there are blank spaces in the document, limits the amount of late fees that can be charged to the lesser of $15 or 8% of the installment amount, which is the same as it currently is in Nevada sales contract. Again, we're not doing anything that they're not already doing for car sales. This is just making it apply to leases as well. Contains terms regarding the residual value, early termination, and default charges. It also sets forth the disclosures that the dealership must provide to the consumer and the consumer must sign, such as in bold, large font, a disclosure that lets consumers know that this is a lease and not a sale, and that they will not own the vehicle at the end of the contract term unless they pay additional money. And that has to be in English and Spanish as well. To read everything carefully, because if there are oral promises not included in the writing will prevail, and that there is no cooling off period in Nevada. Some states, such as California, have a 72-hour period where you can buy a car, take it home, let's say it breaks down on you on the way home, you can return that car within 72 hours and say, hey, I don't want this car, it's a lemon, right? Nevada, we do not have that. And so we're letting people know that if they lease this vehicle, there's no opportunity to take the vehicle back. It also makes sure that if the contract contradicts the statutory protections, the statute will prevail. And if the disclosures aren't provided, it will be considered a sale. Section 4 lays out additional protections that are already included in car sales, such as the signal document rule and the font requirements of the text of the contract. Section 5 is the requirement for dealers to have all the spaces being filled in prior to having the contract signed, and section 6 puts in a civil right of action for people when the dealership has violated these provisions. Section 7 is just definitions, and then section 8 through 11 is conforming language, just to make sure that the amendment complies with the current language of the statute. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I am available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Assemblyman Flores, did you have someone else you would like to bring up into the queue before we turn it over to the committee members?
Assemblyman Edgar Flores, for the record. No, Madam Vice Chair. At this time, we'll take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So committee members, with that, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I have a question from Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Assemblyman Flores. This seems like a great bill. I'm saddened to hear of the abuse that's going out in the community, and this sounds like something that is very needed. My question is, and I don't even know if it happens, with some of the other car rental companies, let's say, like a Budget or Avis or something like that, is anything in here, and I don't even know if anybody from those places might rent a car for over 4 months there, but will anything here change how they handle their business?
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Madam Vice Chair, through you, Assemblyman Edgar Flores, for the record. That's not what we're intending to capture. And Ms. Romero could correct me if I'm wrong, but in that scenario of you renting a vehicle, that would not be applicable here. But Ms. Romero, you may have additional information, or maybe you've seen a scenario where somebody thinks they're purchasing a car and in fact they're renting one. Maybe you could provide some insight as to that.
Thank you, Sophia Romero, for the record. Through Vice Chair Carlton, to Assemblyman Flores and Assemblywoman. I have not seen that scenario, and this would not apply to rentals such as Avis, Budget, Rent a Car, those type of things. This is a lease term from a dealership that would, and of course, dealership is defined in the statute. It is one of the definitions. So a rental car place would not be affected by this statute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And everyone, folks can go directly to the presenter or respond to the member. There's no need to go through the chair. So with that, are there other questions from the committee at this time? Mr. Assemblyman O'Neill, did you have a question? Did I see you raise your hand?
No, Madam Vice Chair, I've just got a terrible headache. I apologize, my
Oh,
sinus.
no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that you're recognized if you needed to be.
I appreciate it, thank you.
So committee members, no other questions of Mr. Fleur? Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. It's not a question, it's just a comment. It's just astonishing to me to hear these stories. And just want to say how sad it is we need to have laws like this. But thank you for bringing this.
Assemblyman Edgar Floyd for the record. Thank you, Madam. Assemblywoman Dickman. Yeah, I agree with you. It's frustrating that we even have to have this conversation. I agree with you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. You know, we don't make these laws for the good guys, because we know there are good guys out there. We make it for we try to keep a level playing field so the good guys aren't at a disadvantage. So with that, I don't see any other questions from any other committee members at this time. So broadcaster, is there anyone else in the Zoom listed in support of this bill that would like to testify? Not seeing anyone. So with that, broadcast services, if we could please go to the phones and please queue up those that are in support.
Yes, Chair, to testify in support on AB 298, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 411, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Michael Kind with Kind Law, and I'm an attorney that has been working in consumer protection since about 2015. The issue that's raised today is something that I see very often, and unfortunately, it's something that many clients and potential clients come to me when they thought that they bought the car, and only after I review deeper, it turns out that it was actually a lease. So with that, I support this measure, and thank you very much.
And thank you for participating today. We appreciate that. Other folks in support?
Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you very much. If we could queue up those that would be in opposition, please.
Testify in opposition on AB 298. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you very much. Could we go to those in neutral, please?
To testify in neutral on AB 298, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 725, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, this is Andrew McKay, A-N-D-R-E-W, M-A-C-K-A-Y, representing the Nevada Franchise Auto Dealers Association. First, Madam Chair, slightly out of order, but I'd be remiss if I didn't comment. And with respect to the prior bill, AB 359, I hadn't registered to testify, but want to just give a quick recognition to the Assemblywoman for reaching out to us several months ago on that bill, and we appreciate her for doing that. On the instant matter, as I indicated before, we are neutral, but I do want to recognize, number one, the Assemblyman, as well as Ms. Romero, as well as Ms. Borderline, for working with us on this bill. As Assemblyman Flores indicated at the beginning, we found it absolutely unbelievable that this practice was occurring in the leasing of used vehicles. Hadn't even heard of such a thing, and appreciate them working with us to make sure that the majority of the bill
is focused on that, and hopefully will take care of these bad actors that, frankly, are preying on the public. So that being said, appreciate everybody's time, and I hope you all have a good weekend.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. I did have you in opposition, but I will change the notes and make sure that you are listed in neutral. So thank you for clarifying that. Broadcast
Thank you,
services,
Madam
is
Chair.
there? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I registered several days before the hearing, that was before the amendment was trued up. So that, faux pas on my part for not adjusting that. Thank you.
No problem. We just want to make sure we have a clear record. So thank you very much. So broadcast services, is there anyone else in the queue for neutral?
Chair, there are no more callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you very much. I believe we can go back to Mr. Flores for any closing comments.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Assemblyman Edgar Flores for the record. Again, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who helped me with this bill, namely Ms. Romero, who's been instrumental in making this language work for everybody. And I wanted to say thank you to all the members. Again, it's frustrating that we even have to do this. But this is a bill that will hopefully start leveling the playing field for the good actors in the industry, go after those bad apples, and take care of our consumers. Again, thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flores, for your presentation and work on this bill this afternoon. So with that, committee members, I believe we can close the hearing on Assembly Bill 298, and that would leave one item on our agenda for this afternoon, which would be public comment. Broadcast services, we'll give it a moment. It's 1:29. We'll wait a moment or so to allow people to call in with public comments. So committee members, please just stand at ease for just a moment. Broadcast services, do we have anyone that is called in under the public comment portion of the meeting?
To take your place in public comment, please press *9 now to join the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much, Broadcast Services, and thank you to all the staff that makes it possible for us to have these meetings. We appreciate all of your help. So with that, committee members, our task for today is done. This meeting is adjourned. Everyone have a wonderful weekend and see you on Monday morning. Thank you all very much.